Nākamais mūsu runātājs profesors Gintautas Vaitoska no Austrijas, kur viņš strādā, bet šodien ir ieradies no Lietuvas. Precējies jau 40 gadus, kas ir tāda man personīgi pazīme ļoti veselīgām attiecībām ar viņu sievu, ir tas, ka viņi ir tie, kuri ir ieradušies Latvijā ar automašīnu un pavadīt garu ceļu kopā pārim automašīnā, slēgtā telpā ilgas stundas, tas ir sasniegums. Malači. Viņš ir arī tēvs, Trumau starptautiskā teoloģijas institūta profesors, laulības un ģimenes maģistra studiju programmas vadītājs, daudz grāmatu par ģimenes attiecībām autors, psihiatrs pēc pirmās izglītības, strādājis Viļņas ģimenes centrā kā konsultants ģimenes attiecību jautājumos. Šodien Rīgā uzrunās mūs par medicīniskajām un psihoemocionālajām problēmām, kas seko gendera ideoloģijas konceptam. Profesors Gintautas Vaitoska. Lūdzu, sagaidām.
Thank you. Dievs svētī Latviju. My topic is basically comprised of three subtopics: medical problems, psycho-emotional problems, and the context of gender ideology. It's not so easy to put them all together, but I will try my best. And we will start from what is going in the human soul, which is psyche, is a soul, and now it is called the science of psychology. So let's start from this famous person, who is Dr. Chloe Jennings White, was described in the National Geographic channel in January 2022, and earlier I think also. And, well, that's a woman sitting on a wheelchair. And this person lives a double life, has a PhD in chemistry, and lives there as a paraplegic in a wheelchair. For the most part, people believe that Chloe is unable to walk, but she has a shocking secret. Chloe isn't paraplegic at all. She is not a paraplegic, but chooses to live as one. She rides to the staircase and then takes a wheelchair on her shoulders and quickly goes up and then sits in it again. DSM-5, American Diagnostic Manual of Mental Diseases, speaks about conditions which could explain it in a way. So body dysmorphic disorder, the person doesn't like his body. Or sometimes the term apotemnophilia is mentioned. It's not yet an official term, but it's mentioned in DSM-5. It's not an official diagnosis yet. But it involves desire to have a limb amputated or to correct an experience of mismatch between a person's sense of the body's identity and its own actual anatomy. So somebody wants to become paraplegic. This person, Chloe Jennings White, wants her brain, spinal cord to be nipped off. Means she wants that its doctors sever it. So she becomes really paraplegic. Okay. Sort of a strange desire for most of us. But human psyche sort of has some universal laws, and you could think, why could that be? And probably to be a paraplegic has also some advantages, because you are not as everybody else, and you have a lot of compassion. And if you don't have a lot of compassion in your childhood, maybe your love container is a bit empty, and you want to get some love. So one could think of possible reasons. But there is one more interesting fact about this person. According to Los Angeles Times, Chloe was a Clive Jensen's white up until at least 2003. Had a PhD in organic chemistry, was born in 1995, grew up in England, obtained doctorate from Cambridge, was married was a married hetero male and a father of 2 sons. Became a Fulbright scholar and postdoctoral fellow at Stanford. So very bright person, very bright person. So in some sense, these things have nothing to do with the mind, and they are not psychologically, when you say somebody is psychologically disturbed or has a problem, it's always a bit of problem to speak like that, because having a psychological problem doesn't sound very respectful, and people may, people would use simpler words for that, for these conditions. So mostly these are the problems of emotional system, as we will see. So this very bright person became a woman. And then, now she made the next step, became a paraplegic. Well, not yet fully. The doctors so far refused to cut her spinal cord, although she asks that. So then a question arises. So what is this? What is this? There is a concept of false self used in psychoanalysis. Donald Winnicott was one of the famous persons who introduced it. And this is basically the inability to accept oneself, to have a good self-esteem. In more usual terms, it's very similar to what Alfred Adler spoke about, inferiority feeling, that you don't feel, first of all, accepted by your family, and then you think you are not as good as you would like, so it's low self-esteem. Different terms are used for that. I think inferiority feeling is most popular. The question is, isn't there a problem here? That is it a wrong body? Or maybe it is a false self in the right body. The German doctor from Munich, Oberarzt, the chief doctor in the clinic for the psychiatry of children, adolescents department, famous doctor raises question whether, again, there is a talk of the necessity for unquestioned gender transition if someone is in the wrong body. People so think. And it's a popular belief now, as we'll see. But is there not an argument for describing this condition as a false psyche in a false life, false self in the right body? So this false self is a well-known term. It's low self-esteem, inability to accept oneself. It develops early in early childhood. Basically, by 6 years, our emotional system is finished, the formation is finished. What does it mean? Our relationship to ourselves, to our parents, and to the world is finished by that time. So emotional sort of relationship. Then our minds change, but this is the very root of how we feel about ourselves, the other person, and the world. So in case of that person, you would think that so he wanted to become a woman because he did not feel well as a man. And well, the research and the whole history of psychology, starting from Freud, and so it's 120 years old and so on, it is clearly known that this inability to accept oneself is rooted in early childhood. The research of John Bowlby, many of you know perhaps John Bowlby, say that secure attachment, maybe some of you heard about secure attachment. Secure attachment is the relationship between the mother and the baby. And the baby is either securely attached, which means also has good self-image, has no feeling of inferiority, or this is still in the nascent stages, no feeling of inferiority, fine. And then you have 3 types of insecure attachment. And this is the same as insecure attachment, is more or less is similar to negative self-image or low self-esteem or inferiority feeling. These are very synonymous terms. And so there is Australian research and then also there is Italian study, which show that psychotraumatic origins of gender dysphoria. So when the boy wants to become a girl, or a girl wants to be a boy, it is discovered that these children had high levels of insecure attachment resulting from ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Parental divorce, harshness of parents, sometimes death of a parent, although that is perhaps less important. Family disharmony. Okay, so in summary, the findings from the current study suggest that gender dysphoria in children arises in association with developmental pathways reflected in at-risk patterns of attachment and high rates of unresolved loss and trauma that are shaped by disruptions to family stability and cohesion, adverse childhood experiences, including maltreatment and, I think, sexual abuse. Okay, so by Kozlovska and other people there. So the same conclusions are reached by Italian team of researchers. Same conclusions, only that they did the research on adult persons who have gender dysphoria. And there is a research method which is well established. The psychology the psychological tests. There is a group of psychological tests which could determine the level of attachment we had to our parents, as we adult persons. A certain procedure would show what kind of attachment: secure attachment, and then 3 types of insecure attachment. And then they discovered that a total of 95 adults took part in the study. The attachment distribution was as follows: 27 secure, 27 insecure, 46 disorganized. So 46, disorganized is the worst type of insecurity. So 46 plus 27 is what, 73, I suppose. So most of these people had traumas. Regarding early traumas, 56 experienced 4 or more traumatic forms of neglect, psychological, physical abuse, rejection, domestic violence. So this research of people with gender dysphoria, adult people with gender dysphoria. So it shows that the roots, psychological roots, are in childhood. And then the official psychiatry also, it's not just these 2 pieces of research. Official psychiatry, if you look in the main psychiatric manual of the United States of America, Kaplan Sadok's synopsis of psychiatry, they say this. They say many things. We won't have time to read them all. But so since Freud, psychoanalysts have postulated that the quality of the mother-child relationship in the first years of life is paramount in establishing gender identity. During this period, mothers normally facilitate their children's awareness of and pride in their gender. Children are valued as little boys and girls. Well, that's sort of understand, normal. And so on. Some children are given the message that they would be more valued if they adopted the girl identity of the gender identity of opposite sex. Rejected or abused children may act on such a belief. For example, an Irish educator and psychoanalyst explains, gives an example. A boy started putting ribbons in his hair and dressing as a girl and saying, I'm a girl, 4-year-old boy. And then they went to a psychologist, child psychologist, and the situation was easily understood. A little sister was born, and she became his father's princess. And so the boy felt deprived of love, and he decided that in order to be loved by my father, I need to be a girl. Okay. That is a simple, you would say, dynamism, and some of them are more complex, because insecure attachment, why would a child be insecurely attached to the mother? And the research says that the gender dysphoric people have insecure attachment. Why would that be? Could you blame it on the mother? Well, it is so because the mother is perhaps not so securely attached to her mother. She's a bit worried, maybe she's a bit anxious, maybe she's a bit sad and depressed. Can you blame the mother for that? Can you blame somebody for that or that emotion? But the child is a very sensitive creature. He or she just takes it, absorbs the emotion of the mother, and so develops insecure attachment. So this is a more complex, you would say, root, and to help it is more difficult than just to see this as well. Well, give back, or return to the, go back to loving your son again, as you love your daughter, to this father, and things will be okay. And then they became okay in that situation. So this is a synopsis of psychiatry. Very, very influential text. And actually, these texts are full. I mean, there are a lot of texts which describe the dynamism of why gender dysphoria develop. There is APA, American Psychological Association Manual of Sexuality. American Psychological Association, very, very liberal, completely pro-gay and so on. But in that textbook, there is a lot of material about the psychological roots, so emotional injuries from which gender dysphoria develop or same-sex attraction develops. Full of material, very official textbook. Well, costs $400, so those who have ability to acquire it, I encourage. Very good book. Okay, so this is Australian team, Italian team. Okay, so then I put the excerpts from Susan Bradley and Kenneth Zucker, an article, older article, Gender Identity Disorder and Psychosexual Problems in Children and Adolescents. And Kenneth Zucker is an editor of Archives of Sexual Behavior, very, very famous man. DSM-5 chapter on gender dysphoria has, basically, he was one of the authors. And he worked with gender dysphoric children, with children who, at that time, the diagnosis was gender identity disorder. Now it's gender dysphoria or gender incongruence in the new World Health Organization classification of diseases. And Kenneth Zucker, with Susan Bradley, explained, well, how it happens, and worked with many children. And there is a monography of 1997, and he has later articles, and most of the children became happy in their own biological sex. They accepted their sex, and the problem was resolved for most of children. He worked with over 500 children. And here, we perhaps don't have time to read it all, but the psychological dynamism is described. So in boys, the scenario is as follows. The boy has a temperamental predisposition to poor anxiety tolerance. Temperament has its role there. Around 20% of people are very sensitive temperamentally now, it is said. And then you need to it's a gift of God. You are like radio device which is able to take many, many waves and many signals. But it's a gift of God. But then it's more complex, so you need to learn how to drive this very sensitive car in a way, which is in your personality. So, okay, during the infancy of this very sensitive boy, his mother feels maybe depressed, overwhelmed in relation to her own difficulty dealing with the amount of parenting, her husband's non-supportiveness, or other difficulties related to either illness in the child or in other members of the family. More often than not, this mother has ambivalent feelings towards males, which her sensitive son perceives. As well, this child may observe his mother's preference for female siblings, or experience a sense that his mother would prefer him as female, and as nurturing or supporting of her. Especially if he has not a good relationship with her father, then there is a triangling mechanism which calls the mother doesn't agree with the father, and because it's difficult, she looks to the boy. And the father has a tendency to look to develop too close relationship with his daughter, a triangling dynamism. So it's not good for the child in this situation. And so she doesn't want to let him free to run around with sticks and shout and so on, because she feels she will lose him. So in a way, she keeps him somewhat restricted. And then the boy feels insecure, and he doesn't want to get to make his mother angry, and then he doesn't feel confident in the boys' group, because if the mother restricts him so much, then he doesn't feel confident. Additional factor to it is that the father is usually a bit absent, so distant in the periphery of the family, or angry and sort of harsh, so the boy doesn't have the bonding with the father, and the mother keeps him too close. And this is already known, was described already by Sigmund Freud. Not yet very explicitly, but he mentioned those two aspects, actually, in the development of homosexual attraction, which is very similar. We'll talk about that. The dynamism is very similar. So in that way, this boy feels, okay, I'm not okay boy, and the mother doesn't like me being a boy, and this father is sort of strange or absent or harsh, and so he, in a way, and he spends a lot of time with the mother, and so then he gradually starts disliking his masculinity, because with other boys he doesn't feel well. He feels better with the girls, he plays with girls and so on, then he starts sometimes imitating girls. And sometimes in stronger cases he says, no, I'm a girl. I not only want to be a girl, I am a girl. And this may happen when he's 3 years old, 4 years old, and later. Okay. So how is it with the girl? It's a bit different. The girl has a temperamental predisposition to poor anxiety tolerance, a bit the same. She lives in a family in which the mother is seen as depressed or inadequate, while the father tends to be aggressive or to have a negative or devalued view of women. There may be overt conflict interpreted as threatening to a mother who is seen as unable to defend herself. As a way of defending herself against overwhelming anxiety, she utilizes a maneuver of identifying with the aggressor. So the girl sees the mother as weak and the father is strong. So for the child to identify with the stronger one, which this term in psychoanalysis means identifying with the aggressor, is sort of easier escape from the stress. Okay. She may then in fantasy both protect herself and her mother if the need for this defense continues, and is not discouraged by parents. The girl will begin to consolidate a fantasized self as a male because of the greater acceptance of masculine behavior in girls. She may not experience the same negative effects on her self-esteem than boys with gender identity disorder. Okay, so this is how it may happen in a girl. And if you want to read what happens, so what I just described, Joseph and Linda Nicolosi have a book, which is unfortunately forbidden on Amazon. You won't find it there. But it's a parent's guide to preventing homosexuality. And actually, it says more about preventing gender dysphoria. I think if you translate in your language, I think they would give the permission. Joseph Nicolosi left us on 2017, so perhaps you would have to say to contact his wife or the editing house. And there it's described what we just told, more or less, and what you do as a parent, and how would a psychologist counsel the whole family and the child. Okay. And as I mentioned, Ken Zucker had Zucker, actually, how it's pronounced, had a lot of success. This is a treatable condition, and the boy becomes a happy boy and girl happy girl. Moreover, what do we have here? What do we have here? Desistance by adolescent rate around 80%. What does it mean? If you have this child, if you don't do anything with therapy or so, only 20%, in only 20% of cases, the gender dysphoria will remain. Okay. That's statistics from different sources, and DSM-5 also mentions it. Incidence, very low. Boys, that one. Girls, this one. Yeah. In children, you have boys are 2 times more frequently afflicted with this suffering, boys. Because for a boy to grow up with a good masculine identity, he needs a bonding with the father. So he needs to do a little exodus from the mother to the father, relatively speaking. And the girl remains with the mother. So also with male homosexuality, we have 2 times more male homosexual than female homosexuals because of the same reason. Because homosexuality is also based on sort of weakness of gender identity. Inability to respect, to accept, and to be happy that you are a boy or a girl. So the numbers are low, and then actually, are there any biological causes for it? They are not found. The hormone research does not show any difference, hormonal difference. The level of testosterone, estrogen in people who are transgender? No. And these are the US Endocrine Society guidelines, which is very pro-liberal and also pro-gender affirming, as it is called, for transition and all that. Very liberal organization. American Academy of Pediatrics is the same. And both of these organizations say, well, basically speaking, there is no somatic cause for this trouble. So there is no somatic, there is no bodily cause. So hormones are all right. So gender identity and gender expression are likely reflect a complex interplay of biological, environmental, and cultural factors. What is biological? Well, temperament is biological. The sensitivity of nervous system, but then environmental, cultural, so environmental, developmental reasons are how you raise a child, the psychological situation in the family. Okay, so that's how it stands, and so we spoke about childhood, and now we can forget all what we said now. Why? Because the rates are these. Very, very low. And what happens now is this. National Health Service of the United Kingdom, 2011, 210 cases of dysphoric children and teenagers. 2021, 3,585. Increase 1,707%. German data reported by Bundestag Scientific Services, the number of genital surgeries in the age from 15 to 25 raised almost 16 times, 1,600 times from 54 in 2007, 970 in 2021. Sweden, 15 times increase. So what happened? Did the families go so down? The psychological atmosphere in the family became so ruined that you have 17? Well, it seems like it's not the case. And the Lisa Littman, American researcher, had a study in 2016 which she called rapid onset of gender dysphoria. And another term, or you would say official term, would be late onset of gender dysphoria. So it doesn't start in childhood, it starts in teenage years. And her research was very much debated and neglected and protested against. But then many people supported. So Kenneth Zucker and other publications said, well, yes, we see the same, we see the same. And what did she see there? She had 257 parents, complete surveys that met study criteria. The AIA children, adolescents, young adults, children, that's what the acronym says, described were predominantly natal female. So 80% of females, where in childhood you have the girls are 2 times less suffering from this. It's an interesting fact. Mean age 16.4 years at the time of study completion, and the mean age of 15.2 when they announced a transgender identification. Parent report, 41 of the AIAs had expressed non-heterosexual orientation before identifying as transgender, so it's very much related to same-sex attraction. And then many, 62% of the AIAs had reportedly been diagnosed with at least one mental health disorder or neurodevelopmental disability prior to the onset of the gender dysphoria. In 36%, 0.8 of the friendship groups described parent participants indicated that the majority of the members became transgender identified. Parents reported subjective declines in the mental health of these children, in parent-children relationships, since these children came out as transgender, and AIAs expressed a range of behaviors that included expressing distrust of non-transgender people, spending time with non-transgender friends, and so on, and only trusting information about gender dysphoria from transgender sources. Most of the parents reported that along with the sudden or rapid onset of gender dysphoria, the children either had an increase in their social media internet use, belonged to a friend group in which one or multiple friends became transgender, identified during a similar time frame, or both. So and then you have this was highly protested, but you had I'm sorry, I don't find the slide which supports the okay, no, okay, so that's a support for the study. It's a discussion in the scientific literature, but that's support. And what happens, and some of you perhaps have this experience. Well, the child spends time on the internet, so he lives with a crowd of people in his bedroom, virtually, and then after 2 or 3 years he comes out and says, well, hey, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy. And please give me testosterone. And in Vilnius you can get it on one bridge. Across the river Neris you go and get a plaster with testosterone if you want. And some professionals unfortunately support the trend. And the girl hates the mother who says, well, it's a nonsense. But because she was sitting in the social media, Reddit is one of the very popular places where you get these ideas, have a lot of production, very impressive YouTube production, where there's a boy speaking with a low voice, sort of masculine, and says, has a girlfriend, and says, the only problem is that society don't think I'm a man. You know, I'm a man, because he's a girl, after having used high dosages of testosterone. So this is what happens. It's a fashion. If you are not well, you are transgender. But let's see that in numbers. Maybe we speak about the gender ideology a bit later, because it will lead us astray from the train of thought now. So Finland, God bless Finland. So we know why already today here in this conference, because of Mrs. Rasinen, but also Kaltila. It was a researcher who published a study in 2016. The first study was of that kind. 2 years of gender identity service for minors, overrepresentation of natal girls with severe problems in adolescent development. And they expected 12 boys and 2 or 4 girls, relying on the statistics of childhood gender dysphoria. What they got 41 girls, 6 boys. Very strange. Why? Then what they found is that 75% of applicants had been or were currently undergoing child and adolescent psychiatric treatment for reasons other than gender dysphoria when they sought referral to sex reassignment. And 2 more were contacted with 2 more conditions. Contacted with general adolescent psychiatric services soon after entering SRE assessment. So what she says that some of them had 2 diagnoses, 75 had a diagnosis. What were they? 64% depression, 55 anxiety disorders, suicidal self-harming behaviors, psychotic disorders, conduct, substance abuse, autistic spectrum. Autistic spectrum is mentioned often. These children, they say around 20% of them have autistic spectrum disorder. So this was the first study which sort of rang a bell. And then she also discovered that these children had been bullied before they came to think about gender identity, and the diagnosis, depression, anxiety, and so on, were established before they came out with an idea that I'm in the wrong gender. See? So they were unwell emotionally, and then the fashion, the gender ideology, the cultural meme, as Paul McHugh says now, if you're unwell, you are transgender. And hello, welcome. You become popular at school. I ask Lithuanian students sometimes, is it popular to be transgender? They say yes. And the most popular now mode of personality is transgender, vegan, no waste. That's most advanced. Okay. So, yeah, no waste I had in the last year, so previous year, so that's in addition to the whole progress. Yeah, so. Now, the studies in 6 European countries, in Canada, Australia also, Japan, also show association between gender dysphoria and mental health disorders. And there are 2 studies which show that the psychiatric illness, or you would say emotional trouble, if you want to be more respectful and so on, appeared before gender identity confusion. And another study is Becerra-Kulqui from United States of America, which is larger than Caltella study. And she studied out of 8 million US teenagers, she found 103,033 transgender children from one multi-state private health maintenance organization, statistically very reliable, California and Georgia, and she found out this. Diagnosis before onset of gender dysphoria. All diagnoses of transfeminine, so the boys who became girls, 71%, transmasculine girls who want to become boys, 74% of cases had the diagnosis before. So it's just confirmation of what the Finnish researcher found. Okay. So that is the situation. Well, there is a manipulative character of the question, is it better to have a dead daughter or living son? You can hear it from some colleagues, psychologists, unfortunately, also in Lithuania, but abroad it's much more frequent. That's a question. And the gender ideology spreads the news. It's very popular. Many of them are suicidal and so on. 41% of transgender students reported having attempted suicide during their lifetime, compared to 14% of all students. This is an American study. Okay, what do you say against it? Well, one argument is that CDS, Center of Disease Control of the United States of America, data of 2020 indicates that only 1 in 265 people who considered suicide actually commit suicide, so it's one. And then, let's say you have the English data from Tavistock Clinic, which was actually closed because of the transitioner scandal. I'll tell a bit later about it. So from 2010 to 2012, 4 teenage patients of the gender identity service in the UK, Tavistock Clinic, out of 15 died from suicide. 2 persons were on the waiting list to be accepted by the clinic, and 2 were already receiving help. So that's not a lot. It's still very tragic. That's not a lot. But also, Finnish researcher Kaltiala, I didn't include it on the slides, but this week came news. She made a study of Finnish population children who suffer from gender identity disorder. She found that the suicide rate actually is explained by the psychiatric suffering, which we saw. I mean, the serious suffering. If you get a diagnosis of depression or anxiety disorder or personality disorder or even psychotic level, these are very serious conditions. Of course, in this population you have suicide rate which is higher, and you cannot explain it by so minority stress, as it is called, because the propaganda says, well, it's minority stress, so because people are transphobic, and therefore they hate them, and therefore they kill themselves. Okay, so that is a statement. Okay. all right, so it's the same. Here is an article of 2022, suicide by clinic-referred transgender adolescents in the United Kingdom. Says the same data. And the conclusion is that, as a former lead psychologist at the Tavistock Clinic has warned, when inaccurate data and alarmist opinion are conveyed very authoritatively to families, we have to wonder what the impact would be on children's understanding of the kind of person they are and their likely face. So, in other words, yes, if the parents are scared, well, intimidated, it's better to have a live daughter or a dead son. I mean, of course, they are very frightened, and of course, doesn't serve a good purpose. So it's the same. Here you have the same conclusion. Journal of Endocrine Society, 2021 conclusion. We could not draw any conclusions about death by suicide from. They studied 20 studies in 22 publications about link between suicide and transgender trend. Okay, so what happened then? What happened then? So there is a fight in the medical community, and the first was Finland. After cultural study, the Finnish, basically the state medical institution, issued a recommendation which says that, as Professor Eckhart said to us, that brain development continues until early adulthood, about 25 years of age. We don't recommend surgical sex reassignment and hormone therapy because the reduction of psychiatric symptoms cannot be achieved with hormonal or surgical interventions. Logical, isn't it? Yeah, that's logical. So the Finns were first. Then Sweden followed because they saw very bad results. There is a movie, The Trans Train, on YouTube. It's about a girl who became man and went back, detransitioner, speaks in a low voice, and of course is mutilated, I think her breasts were moved away and so on. And she speaks, her mental state did not improve, and she's, after these procedures, the person becomes basically very frequently infertile and so on. So the Swedes stopped it. They recommend psychosocial interventions, which is, well, counseling and psychotherapy, child psychiatric treatment, and suicide prevention measured when necessary. Measures when necessary, prevention measures. Okay. The Swedes. Well, the very famous story, maybe some of you know, or many of you know, it's Keira Bell in London, who is a woman whose breasts were taken away. She used testosterone, the voice went down, and it remains low. In the Trans Train movie, you see the voice remains low. There is baldness, and the facial hair appears, and these are irreversible. So don't go back. So she put Tavistock Clinic to court. Okay, we are at the end of our... Okay, she put to court, and she won the case, and Tavistock Clinic was closed. Closed. Okay, so France followed the suit. Similar statement. United Kingdom, psychological support is first strategy, medical strategy. Norway, Denmark, New Zealand, Australia, the US, some states, 19 states restricted. Okay. Okay, organizations that help, who research, do conferences, latest scientific research, international Foundation for Therapeutic Counseling Choice, European-based organization. Mike Davidson is in Belfast. Every year they have a conference, great conference. Teachers, social workers, theologians, psychologists, doctors attend it. Top researchers give newest research. In America, it's Associated Alliance for Therapeutic Choice and Scientific Integrity. So the time is out. I did not speak about what? I did not speak about the gender ideology. How did it start? Okay. So maybe in the questions it comes. Because this madness has its cause in some people who were very bright intellectually, but a little mad emotionally, so to say. John Money and other people. So this we did not examine, so we limited ourselves to basically the medical, psychological aspects here. So that's it, yes.
Yes, the good news is that we still have time for the questions. That's fine. So, first question: do children who grow up with same-sex couples have any trauma that may interfere with his or her masculinity, femininity, or gender identity?
Yes, there is a research of Mark Regnerus of 2012 where he showed that statistically children who grow up with same-sex couples are more frequently inappropriately touched, basically abused sexually, and the percentage of gay lifestyle, both in male variation, female variation, is more frequent. Yeah.
Okay. And boys' gender identity is linked to a relationship with their father. Does the epidemic of the fatherless generation, would it be the cause of gender identity disorder, the lack of fathers?
Yeah, that is observed. Of course, a single mother can raise a self-confident boy, but it's a bit more challenging because she feels lonely, and she may have an increased tendency to keep this boy for herself in a way that he doesn't leave her. So. There is some research which show that this happens a bit more frequently. However, it's not a fate. It's not that it's decided. You would say it's a more possible. Yeah.
Is there a correlation between children who have grown with homosexual couples and one-parent families? For example, if during war women raise their kids alone. So it's a follow-up question to the previous one.
Yes, it's more or less the same question. Can single mother raise a self-confident boy? So yes, she can. It's a bit more difficult because she needs a lot of sacrifice and self-denying, sacrifice in a way, because this boy, if he's a boy, he runs away from her eventually. Okay. And sometimes pretty early in life, he is running around with weapons, and is not so comforting as a little girl can be to the mother. So the mother may be more tempted to restrict his freedom. So so that happens. Actually, I would add that for boys, as Kenneth Zucker says, with transgender boys or teenage boys. Most of them have a homosexual inclination. So, and then some specialists, some discussion in this field is going on that transgender trend is homophobic. And there are even accusations sometimes that, well, to be gay is to be a failed transgender. Can you imagine such a development in high science and, so to say, in our society. So, but many of the boys who have transgender trends, because it's sort of, there is a certain logic, of course, a very unfortunate logic, but because homosexual relationships, you are attracted by men and you may be in the role in the female role, at least predominantly. So logically, maybe you are a woman. So that is a trend, actually. That is a trend. Not all of them, but that is a trend.
Okay, with that I say thank you once more, Professors Gintautas Vaitoska.